Welcome back to the FastAPI Backend Series. In the last episode, we built a real sales endpoint. It worked. It returned data, but it had no contract. Today, we make it professional. Today, we define structure. We are introducing response models with Pydantic. Now, let's take a look at the problem with returning raw dictionaries. If you recall from the last episode, in our main.py file, we created a sales endpoint. If you look at this line here, we're just returning raw dictionaries. There's no schema validation, no documented structure guarantee, no response typing. Swagger doesn't show a structured model. And any client consuming this API, they will just be guessing the shape of the response. If someone changes a column name or remove a field from the database, the API doesn't protest. It just ships whatever dictionary it has. There's no contract enforcing the response shape. So when the shape changes, nothing catches it. Real APIs don't return guesses. They return contracts. So how do we fix this? Introducing Pydantic response models. A Pydantic response model is a typed schema that defines what fields your API returns, what types those fields must be, what structure the JSON response must follow. It acts as a validator, a serializer, a contract, and auto documentation for FastAPI. Instead of returning arbitrary dictionaries, you return structured data that is validated and guaranteed. In short, a Pydantic response model is not just a class, it's a contract. It says this endpoint will return exactly this shape, no more, no less. If the data doesn't match, it doesn't ship. In this episode, we'll create a new file, schemas.py, under the app folder, and in this file, we will define two classes. The first class, or model, employee sales, will be used to define the response structure. And the other class, employee sales response, will be used to define the shape of the entire API response. Then we will update the main.py file to change the sales endpoint from episode 4 to use the Pydantic model instead of returning arbitrary dictionaries. Now let's jump over to VS Code to implement this. So now we're in VS Code. We'll open our project and then we'll go to the terminal and then create a new file called schemas.py. So we'll use the touch command and we'll make sure that this file goes underneath the app folder. So we'll call it schemas.py. This will create an empty file under the app folder. So we'll go inside of that file and then we'll type in the code for our Pydantic model. So here is the code that's defining our response structure. First, we inherit the base model. This is what gives us validation and serialization. Then we move into the first class here, employee sales. This class represents our row of sales data, one row of our sales data. As you can see, it has an employee ID, which is an integer, an employee name, which is a string, and the total sales, which is a decimal. We're using decimal here because money should never be a float. Each field here is typed, not assumed, not implied, explicit. If any of these fields are missing or the type is wrong, Pydantic will catch it. Now the second model or class here defines the shape of the entire API response. Our API returns a list of employee sales object, not random dictionaries. Structured validated objects. So the response isn't just one employee, it's a container, a list of properly defined sales records. This is the difference between data and structure. We are not just returning JSON anymore. We're returning a defined shape. We're teaching the API what it's allowed to return. When we use this as a FastAPI response model, three things happen automatically. The output is validated, it's serialized correctly to JSON, and the OpenAPI docs are generated from this structure. This is what turns a working API into a professional API. Now let's modify the endpoint to use the Pydantic model. So let's open the main py file, and this is what it looks like currently based on our previous episode 4. As you can see, the sale point is returning the data as an arbitrary dictionary. So first, let's import the employee sales response class from the app schema we just created. So we'll go here and add the import. So we just added the code to import the employee sales response from our app.schemas. So let's just make another version. Instead of modifying our sales, we'll create another version of this endpoint to use the Pydantic. We could have easily modified this, but we'll just create just to keep this as in for comparison. So we'll just copy this and we'll create a new version of this right underneath the original one. We'll call it sales version 2. Now we'll add the response model parameter to the app-get decorator here to enforce the employee sales response schema on the output. So we just added the response model equals employee sales response parameter. This one parameter changes everything. Setting it means the API will always return data in a specific defined format. It also automatically checks the data before sending it, removes any extra fields that shouldn't be exposed, and updates the API documentation to clearly show what the response looks like. So as you can see, nothing really changes other than adding, if you're comparing the sales original version versus the new version that we're creating here, other than just the response model, because employee sales response parameter is the difference here. Now let's go and test this using Swagger and see how it works and what is, what we see as the differences. First, let's save our changes, and then we'll run and debug. And as you can see, we can go to our browser using this localhost at port 8000. So let's jump to our browser. Now at our browser, if we go to docs, we'll get our Swagger documentation. Here's our new endpoint sales version 2. If we go here and try it out, execute, and check out our response. Notice our response looks like right now. Here's our data, and notice right below that is a description. You notice the difference. We now have type documentation. This isn't just returning JSON, it's describing the behavior. And if we scroll down just a little bit more, we can see our schemas. And if we were to expand this, you can see the description of our employee sales. And we can even see the employee sales response, what the expected types are, and so on. So why does this matter, especially in production? Well, front-end teams rely on contracts. Mobile apps depend on schema stability. API versioning depends on defined models. Validation prevents silent data corruption. Loose data creates tight problems. So type contracts create stable systems. That's why it matters. In other words, if I hand this documentation over to a developer that wants to use my API, they'll know exactly what to expect and what to use in terms of the employee sales response, what to expect, what kind of data is employee ID, employee name, total sales, and so on. And if we were to compare the original sales endpoint here after we execute it, look at how the data is a bit different. Look at the decimal places. It's not even giving you what the type is here. It's just assume that it's an integer, where it's really like a decimal. If you compare that to what you get as an output to the version 2, if you look at the data, it formats the decimal endpoints for you here. You know exactly that this is of type money with the cents return, and that's just one of the differences that we can see in comparison to the raw dictionary, the arbitrary dictionary versus the Pydantic. And that's it. Now let's go back to VS Code and commit these changes and push them to GitHub. So we'll go here, source control, then we'll put in a message like episode 5. We added Pydantic response models, and then we'll commit and then sync the changes so that they get pushed to GitHub. So in this episode, we didn't change behavior, we changed reliability. That's architecture. the database computes, the view aggregates, the endpoint exposes, and the response model defines the contract. This is backend engineering. Right now, our endpoint is public. It has no authentication. Anybody can use it and have access to it. In the next episode, we secure it because real APIs protect their data. In closing, we didn't just add Pydantic, we define structure, we define consistency, and we define trust. Now, if you're serious about backend engineering, this is the difference between code that works and code that scales. And if this brought you clarity, stick around. Like this video, subscribe, and we'll keep building. I'll see you in episode 6.